welcome to Legends of Dice Episode 4. The Details Matter. I'm one of your hosts, Kylar, joined by the other host, Zeri.
I'm the other host, Zeri.
Yes, she is. If you can see behind me, I've been moving, so if you hear thunderous sounds during this recording, it's because my roommate is moving heavy objects in the kitchen. He's not here now, but he could be later. So keep an eye out for that. That's exciting. Once again, we're going to go through, talk about news from Tableland, highlights from the table. We've got two separate sessions to go through highlights of this time because we got our new Tuesday sessions. And then we're going to get to our main topic, talking about details, more specifically, how do GMs determine what to tell the players when, like if they need something, and should you ever let your players be wrong, like have them think they know something and have what they think they know be wrong. So that about covers it. Check the description for links, and let's get to it. So, news from Tableland. As far as I understand it, it's been a slow news week, according to Zeri. So, do you have any news for us?
Well, okay, so we can put links in this stuff. The main things that we've had that we talked about has more been theory crafting. So we've had the Taking 20 video, which if you're part of the D&D Beyond versus the paperback book discussion, the whole drama there, he does a good job of kind of highlighting and explaining the nuances because he has a lot of background in sales. That's actually where he comes from. So I found that very fascinating. I think Kylar here would find that very fascinating, but there's not a lot of people that are weird like us that like boring topics to delve into. So if you are interested in that, I would highly suggest going and see that. But honestly, just to break down the whole drama, I would just say stop. Just buy all your books, the digital D&D Beyond thing. Okay, makes it way easier, and you avoid the drama. I understand if you've already bought the core rule book and all of that, but just to save yourself the drama and buy everything digital now.
But that's never gonna happen. That's not how that works. You're
No,
asking people to make sense and not stop complaining about things. So I think alternatively there should be some sort of magical solution that will make all sides happy
if
and
someone can
then make
propose
nobody
that,
lose any money whatsoever. It has to be feasible. It's gonna be great. It'll just rain down as a Christmas miracle. Like everybody has D&D now. It worked out great.
we can start we'll make that a new social issue. Everyone deserves a D&D copy. It'd be great.
That that sounds reasonable. I'll be
Yeah,
on board with that one.
yeah. Thank you. We'll get a petition going. Other than that, there is another video from XP to level 3, I believe is what they're called. Great channel. I just felt uncomfortable linking anything because they do have some language. So just put that warning there. But he had a great video on the monk and about how it's the easiest class to play in D&D, which I think you could probably extrapolate that to most systems. And I think most people think that everyone has this idea that the fighter and the rogue are the the easiest classes to play. But I think he did a good job of pointing out the fact that actually in both of those classes, there are lots of other things you have to manage, especially when you add weapons to there. Whereas the monk is simple. You punch things, and
As
that's it.
all true monks do. You know the monks are legendary and known for their punching of people in the face that they disagree with. I
Yep.
point you towards the Dalai Lama and all of the self-immolations. They mean business over there.
Yes. You do not disagree with the Dalai Lama. He will kung fu you in the face. And that's what we've all learned
That
from many kung fu movies.
and from role-playing games that tell us the
And
monks are people who punch things in the face.
yes. But also he put it also I think too he managed to kind of make the monk look fascinating, because then after I watched that, then I made a monk in D&D Beyond. Which, again, another plugin. Go do D&D Beyond, because the character creation system is so much fun. You'll make 6 characters and probably only use one of them, but you'll have fun making all 6.
Alternatively, you run a campaign of just yourself, and you have 6 different characters, and then at one GM, and you control all of them, and you talk to yourself. But you have to do different voices
That's called a
and make
book.
it a comedy. It'd be great.
That's called a book or a YouTube video.
Well, we put our games on YouTube, so You play the game, it's on YouTube, so you can just say, I'm making a YouTube video, and then you can sell it to your GM that way. It's like, I don't want to play with anybody else because everybody else makes things too complicated. I'll make a nice story with my 6 characters doing their 6 interesting things, and it'll be great. And then I'll get an opportunity to actually play all 6 characters. You won't have to deal with people splitting the party. Okay, never mind. I might do that anyway. Cannot promise that I will not split the party. That's an important
Okay,
caveat that you have to do when you're selling it to your gym. But you have to
true.
make it sound like you're going to try not to split the party, but then come up with backstories that let you split the party willy nilly and you like 5 different chunks. So you're controlling one character in a bunch of different places. Nothing can go wrong.
You know what? I like this plan. So everyone coming next week, Kylar and I are going to run a 2-player campaign with 6 characters. It'll be great, and I foresee it not going terribly at all.
What system were we using? I'll get right on that.
Obviously, D&D Beyond, because
I
I
don't
keep
have
playing.
that, Zeri.
Well, borrow your brother's copy.
Sounds like a lot of work. Nope, idea scrapped. Not doing it.
Dang it. All right. Well, we should probably move to highlights then if we're not going to make new things. Unless you wanted to do your news segment, but I don't see how it's related. But
No,
that's
it
fine.
is not. So highlights from the table. So now we've got highlights from Tuesday and highlights from Friday. So if you're keeping score, that is in fact 2 highlights per week that we have now. Although me having a highlight from Tuesday would require me to watch the Tuesday session early enough to do this recording, which I have not done yet because I was moving. I might in later weeks actually watch it before this. But for now, I'll let Zeri explain what is going on Tuesdays.
So, on Tuesday nights, we are playing in a World of Warcraft campaign. It's an alternate history where Arthas didn't go crazy and murder everyone in Stratholme. Instead, he listened to Medivh's plan and led his people across the sea to from Lordaeron and made his little kingdom and everything. And then he married Lady Jaina, which is probably my favorite part of the campaign because I always thought that it was a shame that they didn't. But moving on from that girly romantic part of the game, we were actually in. He kept saying the name, but I couldn't quite understand him. We're in a harbor town, and it's in my notes somewhere, but it doesn't. I don't think I spelled it correctly. But we're in a harbor town. We were sent there from Greymane, who is the leader of the Worgen village that I'm now forgetting. But it's basically it's Kyra's character's king, duke, what have you. And he sent us on a mission. And so we tried to book passage on a ship to, I believe, Lordaeron is where we're headed. But we were informed that was gonna be we were gonna have to wait for like 14 days. And he and I were like, well, what are we gonna do in the meantime? So we thought at first, I thought, Oriana, my character, thought at first that we were gonna sleep in the tavern. But the thing is, he's playing a worgen that spent a lot of time outdoors, and I'm playing a night elf. And when we went inside, to say that the inside of the tavern looked like China is an understatement. And we decided there was too much smoke to sleep and function normally. So we decided to sleep outside. And this is getting to my highlight of the night. So while we were there, the other thing you have to know is if you haven't watched our games, of all of the players, Kyrath and I are probably the most friendly people and just want to like save everyone and try and make everyone happy. And, we've kind of tailored our characters to fit with our crazy group, but because we both have that tendency, these 2 characters are probably, I actually said it in the campaign. If there's an opposite to the murder hobos, that's us. Because the first we saw this camp that was mysteriously out. We found a nice place and we found this camp that was mysteriously out, kind of away from us, basically our neighbors. And the first thing we decided to do was go and introduce ourselves. And so we just strode up to the camp and we were like, hi, neighbors, we're sleeping over there. And it turned out that they were a camp of demon hunters who weren't super happy that these 2 idiots just strolled up to them and treated them like, new neighbors in the suburbs, which is basically what we did. And so my character is a night elf priestess, and she was kind of weirded out by demon hunters. They're not super popular back home. So we decided that we can't. They promised that they were gonna watch the night for us, that they were gonna watch over the camp and stuff and let us know if anything happened. But neither of us believed them. So we agreed that we would take turns, but we didn't want them because we knew they were watching us. We didn't want them to know that we were staying up. So he stayed up, and his plan. So while I slept on the tree, his plan was to just talk to animals for 2 hours straight because we only get 2 hours of watch time before we have to take an 8-hour rest. So he cast a spell which let him talk to animals, but I think he failed it, so he didn't actually get any of the information we wanted to. But he still continued to talk to the squirrels. So he talked to squirrels for about 2 hours, and then when those 2 hours were up, he woke my character up and told her, okay, it's time for your nightly prayers. And my character didn't know where he was going with this. And at first she was like, I don't get up in the middle of the night and pray. That's weird. And then he was like, no, your nightly prayers. And I realized what he was really saying was he wanted me to be up and watch, but he didn't want me to be obvious about it. So then my character got up and basically did this and talked to herself for 2 hours about nonsensical things, but tried to make it look like she was praying the whole time. And because the curse of perception seems to follow me and my characters everywhere we went, I, of course, rolled the same perception that Lexa and Ariel and all my characters roll, which was a 6. So I saw nothing, but I kept praying. And then after that, well, so, okay, then I was thinking, okay, so I've done my 2 hours. Now it's time to get up. Well, so I woke up Kyrat's character. I wrote his character's name's Audric. I woke him up and I was like, okay, I'm done with my prayers. It's time to go. And he goes, wait, you've been praying for 2 hours. I've only slept for 2 hours. It's not time to go. And I was like, oh, right. Well, time to go back to bed. I just wanted to tell you about my prayers. And then I tied myself up to the tree and then slept for the rest of the like 6 hours that he slept. So, yeah, that didn't go over as well as we thought. I'm pretty sure that the out of game, in character, we don't know this, but out of character, I'm pretty sure those demon hunters watched us be idiots that whole night and knew exactly what we were doing and just laughed at us because, I mean, we were pretty humorous. So,
I
yeah,
mean,
that was the short version of a very long story. Maybe not that short,
too
though.
short. It was the medium version. It wasn't like the cliff notes. It was like the I'll say a few sentences about how we got here, and then that turns into a couple more sentences, and a couple more. But here
Mhm.
we are not the bad guys. Like the winking.
Well, we're not, and it's
Well,
very
yeah, I know.
obvious that we're not. That's the problem. Like we don't do mysterious character very well. We're both pretty obvious about who we are.
You can be obvious and just be like, if you attack me, I'll punch you in the face. If you're the monk, you'd be like, if you dress like a monk, everybody knows you can punch them in the face, but you'll probably be fairly friendly.
That's true.
Another
That's true.
advantage of being a monk, you don't have to pretend. You can just be like,
I
yeah,
will
you
punch
know
you
I
in the
can
face.
fight, so you want to test your luck? I don't think so. But
Mm-mm,
hey, how's it going?
mm-mm. So that's my highlight slash plug-in for why you should watch Tuesday Night, because it was filled of moments like that where we basically just made goofballs of ourselves and everything we did.
See, I just don't understand the, oh, we have the safe, secure place to go sleep. Oh no, let's go sleep out in the middle of, you know,
You
camp
haven't
next
seen
to
the tavern
demon
yet.
hunters.
Honest, I'm serious. It was like, you know how everyone in China have masks on while they go through the streets. I was considering it, to be honest. We were like, how can we get rid of the smoke in this place and not offend everyone? I mean, I think I mean, Ariana spent the whole conversation doing this the whole time, trying to breathe.
Well, serious, what happens is you just cause a giant fight, and then everybody runs away, and then you have it to yourself, and then you're like, oh, yeah, and just blow out all the candles and all the incense and everything else. And oh, look, we have the largest bedroom to ourselves because everybody ran away because we started this giant fight. How did that
Monsters.
happen?
As long as we don't have to pay for it, I think he and I have like 8 gold between us. It won't work out so well.
You have to pay damage. You just run away, and if somebody tries to make you pay, then you like knock them unconscious, and then you run away. See, if you wore masks, then no one would know your faces, so you couldn't be identified either. So that's, you know,
I'm I'm lawful good. I don't think that would work so well for me. I just start looking like a bandit here.
wear like a fun like head shroud thing that doesn't look like a bandit's mask. This looks like a
That's like
traveler's cloak that happens to have lots of face coverings because it's windy and you
I'm
get wind burned a lot. You need face coverings.
I'm also a priestess of a loon. I don't think that that's very good on my part. Like, come follow a loon. Also, punch in face. Like that, it doesn't work
I
very
said just
well.
start a fight. I didn't say you had to participate in the fight. You just make it look like somebody else did something, and then
They're all heretics. Go fight them. And then sneak upstairs and go to bed.
this is what I'm saying.
Okay, I'll try it next time.
Yeah, you get other people to fight for you. That's the mark of. Then you can still say, "I didn't do it. I'm lawful good. I just said words that were true words."
I do have a 5 in persuasion, so I mean it's feasible. I
Yeah,
could do
you
it.
just always say something that's true that you know people can get mad about, and you'll be like, I can't control if they get mad about the truth. It's the truth. I feel no
They
guilt."
couldn't handle the truth.
Nope, I could not. All right, time for my highlight. So on Friday, Kareth and I made it back to Fantasy Age finally, and finding Curiosity and Harmony by themselves while the rest of the party did a bunch of nonsensical, crazy things, like getting seen by a bandit camp and Gorm getting captured again. Woo. Um, Harmony decided, in the midst of making sure Curiosity didn't lose his mind after being shot a bunch of times with arrows, um, was partially venting his frustration at some members of the party and how the fight happened, and also channeling that into advice for Curiosity should Harmony not be there again. Um, so basically saying just stay by Winter the whole time and maybe trust Ari a little bit because he kind of knows what he's doing, and Vinda, but she doesn't really know what she's doing. So really just stick by Winter. And so my highlight wasn't the actual me telling Curiosity this, although I had been wanting to say something like this for a while because it was a long time ago. Zeri asked us to send, like, what does your character think about each of these people? Like, that was ages ago. That was before we even met Bramble. So
I
I
probably
think
need to set that questionnaire again, to be
no,
honest.
it's
Things
all
have
mostly the
changed.
same. It's the same. It's this. It's pretty much. And Harmony's like, I was vindicated. How I felt about these people, it plays out in reality. This is good. I think I know what I'm doing. But my I enjoyed the reaction of the other players. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, that was fine. I was like, no, nope, nope. Because I was basically just, well, everyone was gone, just throwing shade at people. And like, what? Why are you doing that? He saved me. I'm like, but he didn't save me. Bramble, I'm looking at you. So that was fun because it was a moment I had been looking forward to because I had known it was going to happen in that session, and then the player's response to it was also entertaining.
No, I really like. You're correct. That's a highlight of mine. I like the fact that you guys got a serious moment. I think for me, having those serious moments kind of checks the fact, like it gives us a chance to remember, like we're trying as best as possible to play real people who have real problems. And so like having a little, even having that moment to start off before craziness happened, I think it kind of it made everyone kind of get recentered onto what, okay, these things just happen, this is how people feel, and then we can dive into combat. And I think it helps to better charge the decision making later on for the rest of the session.
Well, see, the other interesting thing is like nobody else really necessarily cares about Harmony and Curiosity's mission that
Mm-mm.
much, and they try to keep it quiet most of the time because they're spies and such that they are concerned about that may or may not exist. I don't know. Zeri runs the campaign. So it's just it was a nice moment for me to draw Curiosity out and just be like, make sure he keeps his eye on the prize, as it were. Like, remember,
Mm-hmm.
we're here for a reason, not just because we're here with this group. And it's, it's nice if we could all make it out alive, but really, you're the most important person of this whole thing, so don't go screwing it up, basically. And
Yeah.
it was important for me to tell him that because through the last couple of sessions, it was just like, I don't know. There goes curiosity doing something again. Oh yay! All right, we're doing it. I guess it's gonna be fine. Nobody's gonna die.
I mean, nobody has. He's done a good job with his job,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, definitely. Again, and the other thing too is you did a lot of character reveal without having to directly reveal it to the players, like the other characters. But for the players, I think also it's a good thing for them to be thinking about those things. Like then that way, when they see you bring those things up, they know the players know. Oh, I want to poke that because that sounds interesting, and I want
Mm-hmm.
to go and figure more
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, because a lot of times what happens is you end up doing something behind the scenes. We're like, oh, we talked about this thing, but you never actually get an opportunity with the 8 players that we have to actually have that one-on-one individual conversation that would be the only time you'd ever have that kind of conversation. So I really like
Hmm.
being separate because I could just say everything related to my backstory without worrying about someone actually a spy and is this going to go horribly wrong. We don't really need to draw
Right.
attention to ourselves. So it was good because it's how I imagined. So Curiosity and Harmony had been traveling basically alone for like 5-ish years. So it's like that's how I imagined how most of the time was spent. It was them talking to each other, kind of. So it was nice to get that kind of thing after a fight.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you both did a pretty good job. I I don't know. I was curious to see how Kyrath was going to do it, being as where he left his character off. A pretty good job of still like he was listening to Harmony, but at the same time really there in the moment, and so it was kind of like half understood for most of what was said.
Yeah, that was interesting. All right, that was my highlight. If you want to check it out and you don't want to see the rest of the party shenanigans, you can just see the beginning part of the episode from last Friday because that's what we started with. So if you want to see me and Harmony and Curiosity having a real conversation, that's what like the first 15 minutes or so, I think. Totally doable. You should totally do it out. Check it out because that was a fun character moment.
Hmm.
Anyway, all right, so that's our highlight. So now we're moving on to our main topic: details. Awesome. Maybe. Or they're not awesome in the case of like, like a Tolkien, except nobody writes character notes. It might get pretty confusing with all of the names that are gibberish.
It's true. It's very true. As he was writing his notes for today's episode, I had to ask him who he was talking about because I was like, I do not remember these people at all.
Oh, that's what happens to the throwaway NPCs that are they show up for a couple sessions, they help you, and then it's like, oh yeah, I guess there was that guy because that was like 5 months ago. Actually, no, that was he died. The character in question died 9 months ago. No, over a year ago. I think it was like probably like
Mhm.
15, 16 months ago. So understandable that you would not remember this seemingly ancillary character who I know to be more important to the overall plot because of something Kyrath told me. Uh,
I mean, you have to remember when we talk about Star Wars, we've been playing this campaign for 2.5 years. It's a lot. It's hard to remember everything that happens in 2.5 years.
unless you're the GM, you go specifically looking back to see what nonsense you can pull from things that people won't remember. Like, remember that guy from that time? Yeah, that was totally important, but you didn't know that.
No, no,
And you don't even
because
remember who this person is.
you don't have a detailed document about everything that you can read repeatedly. I do.
No, maybe. Unless we deleted the notes, that would be sad. It's
But no,
like
that ends the
it's
campaign.
gonna get hit like 300 pages. It's long. It's very long. Kyrath had very detailed notes, and then he would write a summary of every single session that happened in the notes. It's a
That's
lot.
way more. I mean, I thought my notes were
Oh no,
detailed. I
you
gave
have
him a
no idea.
bunch of notes.
His notes are crazy. My notes are. I stopped. I was typing out everything, and then I was like, nope. I remember enough to plan the next session, and I'll put important things in here, and then I'm done. I'm out. I'm not gonna type paragraphs of what happened to the entire session. Not happening. Anyway, details. We're giving you a lot of random details that mean nothing to you, but we're gonna talk about how not to do that and how to give your characters details they actually need.
Yes. So I think probably the first thing we need to explain is probably what we mean by details. We're not talking about things like character names and what people are wearing, unless that's important. mostly what we're talking about is like when you first set a scene. So like your players walking into town. What are the first things that they see? What are the first things that they notice? And you just lay out a scene for them. And what we're mainly talking about is what do you include and what do you let them sort of what things should be implied and what things you just kind of let their imaginations go for. So one of the things that I have done now, again, gonna bring up Critical Role here, but I saw this from Matthew Mercer. What he started to do is he would pick a character and he'd draw the scene from that character's perspective. And the advantage to doing that is if you know your and this I will say this for just about everything that we do, to know your players and their characters, know them really well. And if you know them and you treat them like real people, then you can draw a scene from their perspective. So like let's say for example my Vacanis party heads into town and I choose Harmony as the character I'm going to draw the perspective on. Well, I know Harmony. Harmony looks for entrance and exits. He looks for threats. He looks for anything out of the ordinary. He's going to notice things like how many guards are around and what are there guard towers here or there. Does anyone look weird or out of place? He's not going to notice so much things like there's a the merchants are selling flowers and bread, and this he's not going to pay attention to that. He's not going to pay attention to the a caravan of rich people walking by and walking through arm in arm and like showing off their wealth. He's not going to care about that. So if I pick him as the person that I'm going to use as to describe the scene to everyone else, I'm focusing on specific details that I want the party to know about. Now, then once you set that scene, then you let your players fill in those details. So then maybe let's say Winter says, "Is there anyone who sells bread in the walkway?" And then I could say, "Yes, you do see this and that." So when we talk about details, what we're talking about is basically how do you set a scene so that your players can then interact and ask questions what that looks like.
Yes. And then you can very easily confuse your players by not giving enough details, especially if it's about to be combat. If it's about to be combat and you don't give your players enough detail, be like, I'll go do this thing. And it's like, what? You want to go jump off the cliff? Okay, you can go jump off the cliff that you didn't know was there because I didn't tell you it was there. It all goes horribly wrong.
Horribly wrong. But that, I mean, for that kind of stuff too, I mean, if you're doing a combat, combat can be different because if you're like us and you make a map, then you don't have to explain as much about what's going on. They can see it. So, for example, our last session that we played in, um, Aretheus wanted to explain to Harmony what he saw. Well, I'd already given them a detailed map and they had seen the map. So I could just say to Barry, the player, well, what do you tell him? What did you see? How many guards do you think that there were
And then
there?
Harmony face palms because he gets no details whatsoever.
No, and that's unfortunate, but that's a player decision,
Mm-hmm.
and we can roll that into when to let your players be wrong, which I think you have some ideas on.
Yeah, so this is story time from Kyras' campaign, from something that he had talked a lot about. So, set scene. If you have no idea what happened during Kyras' section of the Star Wars campaign, basically the party went to destroy a Sith crystal that had like a Force monster stuck in it, basically. And when we destroyed it, we got the essence of it. We basically became the crystal, so we're housing this monster like in our own bodies a little bit. It didn't really do anything to us, but we thought the way it was working is it just like after a certain amount of time it would like manifest itself as like a creature, like a monster, and go attack either us or somebody else. That's not actually what's happening, and it led to a more significant problem for us. It turned out the whole finale was driven by this whole us not necessarily understanding that that's how it was working. And Kyrath didn't tell us that because we never actually asked the questions that would have let us find out that it happened. So the way it actually worked is we were acting as the crystal, but the way the crystal actually worked is you use the crystal to like infect somebody with it, and then the shadow, which is the name of the creature, would control that person, basically take over that person's body, and could change back and forth between the shadow form and human form or alien form, whatever it's inhabiting. We didn't know this, so the first time we could have found this out was Lieutenant Arvis on the ship that we were on, he actually turned into the shadow. So basically, it would be someone we came into contact with, like when we went to a new location, one of the first people we came into contact with, it would take over, basically. Um, but then shenanigans happened and the whole ship got ripped in half, and then, you know, a lot of people may or may not have died. We saved most people, but then after we got on the station, after we had killed the shadow and we had done everything else we were supposed to, we weren't looking around for Lieutenant Arvis because we were just like, we're not on the ship, so like, he's probably busy. Like, he was only there to facilitate us while we were on the ship, so nobody really cared. So we didn't ask then. So that was the first time. And then the next time it happened is when we went to Nar Shaddaa. And actually, the guy who was running the landing pad that we were at, it became him, and then it attacked us on the landing pad. Um, but then Dell got poisoned. We rushed him back to the Kolto tank on board the ship. And then while we were in the ship, a squad of mercenary people came to attack the ship, and then we just left and blew up the landing pad. So we never saw that. Hey, what happened to the guy who was there? So then when Pakaz and Dell went back to Thela, and we ended up crashing, we had kind of thought, well, maybe everybody has to be in the same place for this to manifest, because if it's just manifesting itself, then it needs all of its energy, or maybe like a higher risk. But since it infects people, so the Sun Guard came to rescue us, retrieve us after we had crashed our ship. And so it actually infected one of the Sun Guard people. He went up to the spirits, it took over all the spirits, and it turned into this whole giant thing, which was a cool finale, but it was based on our misunderstanding of how the shadow was working, which was never directly stated, but Kyrath told me afterwards, like, yeah, like, there was this giant chain of things. Like, you could have seen it there, and you could have seen it there, and it's just the way circumstances worked out, we just had a misunderstanding about how it was functioning. And so we were just like, well, if we don't go there and it doesn't manifest, like, because we had never really thought that it could look like a person and then change. It was always like, if someone had been on the bridge and paying attention when Lieutenant Arvis had shown up, we were like, whoa, Lieutenant Arvis turned into the shadow. It would have been really easy, but we were busy dealing with the bounty hunters down in the middle of nowhere because everybody was unconscious and Lex had to rescue everybody, so we never had an opportunity to see it change or find the person who was dead because we killed them. And Kyrath just, let it go, and then we found out about our problems later. He didn't just be like, he could have, because Dell had a lot of visions about things. He could have been like, you think that, he could have given me a vision where he expressly seen somebody change and be like, oh, look, now you know that this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then
No,
Dell
I
would have been
remember.
like,
Yeah.
oh, let's avoid that. But he didn't do that. And
No, I remember we were talking about this earlier. I mean, I remember going through that campaign, and I think probably the best example of this is when we were actually at the asteroid station. There was a lot of opportunities where he could have just laid out the whole thing for us, where he could just be like, "This is the monster. This is how it works, and this is what we did." But the way he set it up is it ended up being a lot of guesswork and investigation. I think all of us had a different idea of how it worked. I can say from Lex's perspective, she thought, because of the things going on with her, she saw the crystal. She thought, okay, something makes me want to destroy this thing, but it must be because this is what's causing the problem. So if we just destroy all the crystals, problem goes away. So clearly she didn't understand what was going on. I think everyone else kind of had, in a similar way, had a different perspective. But I don't remember a time when Kyrath sat everyone down and was like, okay, no, 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 no. You all need to have the same idea about how this is functioning, what these details are.
yeah, I still get on about how undetailed his Sith researcher's journal was. Oh my goodness, it was very
It's
vague. He's
true.
like, oh, it was clear from the journal. Like, it was not clear from the journal, and I was like, nope, no, it really wasn't. Um, but again, I think that it worked out. He didn't need to tell us. We ended up winning anyway. So, sad that Lieutenant Arvis is dead, but we didn't really know anybody else infected, so nobody cares. And nobody
No,
remembers Lieutenant Arvis except me, apparently.
no, I think I remember him now. Wasn't he the guy that looked like Karth?
Yes. Yes, he
Yes.
was.
Yeah, I remember him. I was bummed when he found out he died. He was actually the only helpful person on board.
Yes.
Everyone else was
Well,
just
yeah, the
dumb.
Jedi was just awful. She was
She
so
was just
annoying.
dumb.
So annoying. She's like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, Tell saw a vision of me dying. Oh no. Great
Yeah,
mental
that
fortitude, Jedi.
spiraled out of
Great.
control
It's like
quickly.
Dell should have said nothing. He regretted it as soon as that. She was useless after that. He was like, All right, should not have told her. I thought telling her would be helpful. It was not helpful. Although she ended up surviving, so I guess it
She
was.
did. Maybe she learned a lesson. Maybe she
To
became,
not panic and that the
yeah.
future isn't fixed and she should calm down.
Well, in a way, in a very micro way, he kind of touched on a theme that happens quite often in Jedi stories is that they're told to be disciplined, and then when they find out that their carefully laid plans are going to go askew, then they ditch discipline and freak out, and then we
And then
have
Dal regrets
Anakin Darth
everything.
Vader.
Everything.
Yeah,
But
Dal wears a T-shirt that says "I regret everything."
I regret everything that everybody else did. That's just,
Right.
that's just
That would probably be that would make a good T-shirt actually. That's a merch idea.
it's
We
like
ever
I
sell our own
regret
merch,
everything, and then on the back it says that everybody else did.
then
You're
everybody
like,
else
oh
did.
look,
Done.
you regret everything. You're just like one of those like sad people who's like angsty at the world, and he's like, oh no, he just doesn't like other people. He's fine. No,
I'm cool. I did fine.
yeah,
But I think I think that so you're touching on a thing that I think a lot of new GMs especially, which I'm proud of your brother that he did not fall into this trap, but a new GMs get worried that you're missing a detail.
oh, how many
Sirva did.
details? How many details you guys missed in my campaign? Because there's a bunch of convoluted stuff that's happening. I was like, we're gonna run with it because it works for my villains if you don't know what's going on. But
You're
yeah,
right. Yeah.
but
No, but like Sirva's fallen in this trap. Bazak fell into this trap. Sirva doesn't do any GMing on here, but she GMs at our home game or did, and she would very often she would kind of pause and check and make sure we all understood clearly what was going on to the point where she basically would reveal the plot to us, and you know that was more excusable because we play with younger people, and so it's like sometimes you need to like just explain things. But if you ever saw the very few episodes of our Star Wars Without Number campaign, there were a couple times where Bazak would like, basically tell us what was going on. Like we would start a conversation where we'd start going the wrong track. We didn't realize it, but we thought, okay, we started making this logic leap, and he would change our trajectory and would not allow us to be wrong. And I think that new GMs especially, fear that greatly because it's like if I allow them to be wrong, then they'll miss these details. They won't go down the carefully um, constructed path that I've created, and that will derail my campaign. And to that, I would say your players are always going to derail your campaign if you let them. But if you Kylar thinks otherwise.
my
But
campaign's not derailed. My campaign is working great. Aside from people being bored out of their skulls for the first couple of sessions, this is great.
yeah, I know for a fact that that was a complete derailing of what was going on.
No,
And
there was no
yeah,
derail. It was a really slow rail. It was like
slow rail, slowing
as the
down.
bandits
So
were catching up.
right, right. But when it comes to detail, I think it's fine. In the campaign that I'm running on the Forerunners, there are several things the players have made some assumptions and some leaps, and I think it's fun. It's more fun for them if they figure those things out on their own and come to that conclusion, or they never figure it out and then it's revealed to them. Now, you don't want to ever. The only caveat to this is you never want to feel like you never want your players to feel like you trap them. So like you purpose like you know the road is clear, like you tell them you go into a cave, but you don't explain that the cave is dark, ominous, and smells like uh you know goblin. If you don't tell them those details and then they see a bunch of goblins, they're going to be a little upset because they're like, well, I thought we were just going into like a random cave, you didn't tell us. I feel like if there's goblins in this, there would be signs of that. And even if you roll like even and some GMs might say, well, they rolled a really real perception. I mean, barring a natural one, I don't know how low of perception you'd have to roll to not see that like a group of goblins were in a cave. Obviously, that's one example, but you see what I'm saying? Where it's like you need to get if it's dangerous, even if it's not obvious. I mean, we've all have been in situations where our gut tells us something's not right. Characters will be in those same situations, so you need to make sure your details don't leave things out.
Yeah, and that ties into um, passive perception versus active perception,
Mm-hmm.
and what would the players just notice versus what should they have to roll for. And I kind of wanted to phase out having everybody, you walk into a new room and everybody's like, I roll perception, and then they don't tell you what they're just looking for stuff. And so I've toyed with the idea of just when people enter a new room, either just looking at their stats and be like, oh, you probably noticed these things. And then if they want to tell me, oh, I'm specifically looking for the person we came in here to find, it's a bar and we're looking for somebody. Okay, then give me a perception check, because like they're way in the back trying to maintain a low profile. You wouldn't just see them. There's a lot of people here. Then you roll for that. I also told, instead of just looking at their stats to figure out what they can see, um, doing a GM, just rolling behind the scenes a perception roll for everybody and being like, wow, he rolled really well. It's like, because I think then that introduces more chance of like a character who might not be the one who always notices, like doesn't have a high perception score, but like, so if you're doing a passive scenario where you just look at stats and you figure out, oh, well, then the most observant person is always going to notice the most details. So then you might as well just tell the scene from their perspective, because that's what you're going to end up doing all the time. But if you do a roll, then maybe they didn't roll as well, and somebody who has like a 0 to perception rolled like a nat 20. You're like, wow, you just walked into this room and you just got like this gut feeling, and you looked right at the very important thing that people normally don't know. You just don't even know why, but your eye was drawn to this thing, and it was exactly what you were looking for. And now we don't have to spend 20 minutes for people like searching the room looking for things until they ask the right question of, oh, is this over? I'm looking over here now, and I'll go over here and do this. But I don't like to roll for the player, so I haven't done it. And I've debated about doing it. I think it can be useful, because then it lets your players, when they say I'm rolling perception, then you can be like, no, you have to tell me what you're specifically looking for. And then if they fail that, they can still go and look for other things. They just couldn't find the one thing that they wanted to look for. But if you're doing passive perception, I would say that doesn't mean if you're rolling and it's passive perception, that doesn't mean, oh, they rolled a 2. Unless you're blind, you've noticed most of the general details about a room. You might not notice like, hey, the guy over the bar might like be looking for a fight, but you notice like, there's some larger dudes at the bar, and there's like, you're gonna notice things when you walk into a room, unless you're like deep in conversation with somebody and you're not paying attention at all.
Mm-hmm.
But then that just
Well, and
you
yeah,
gotta
but you
give your
can,
you gotta give your players enough information so that they
yeah,
know what to ask for specifically. So if they're going to make an active roll, they need to know enough about the room that they know, oh, that table over there, that sounds fun. I want to know like who is sitting at that table, what's going on at the table, because you said it looked like
mm-hmm.
they were playing cards. I want in on the gambling, but I want to know for sure what's going on over there. So I'm going to roll an active perception check. I'm going to actively go check this thing out. But if you don't give anybody, you just walk into a bar and it's like, okay. I mean, if nothing important is happening at the bar and they just wanted to go to the bar for a drink, and you're just like, then okay, then fine. Then don't give them anything that they would be like, oh, I'm gonna go do this. If you want to, okay, you got a drink at the bar. Nothing exciting happened, because bars always break out in fights. I won't give you any details. They'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go investigate the thing, because you can give people too many details that aren't important. If you
That's
don't,
true.
if you don't want them to spend 2 hours doing things at the bar, don't make the bar interesting. Just be like, yeah, you got a drink, and then you left. Unless you want to go like start a fight or something, but please don't, because that happens all the time. Um, but I don't know, it's something that I still haven't figured out exactly how to deal with the perception. But
No, and it's something you and I have talked a lot about, and probably the person who put the doubt in you, because I was like, oh, if people don't like it, would you roll for them? The players like rolling stuff, but honestly, the more we've talked about it, the more I'm kind of starting to lean this way, because in the Tuesday campaign that Barry did, he made a note of our passive perception, and then he used that to describe things to us. So he always knew, I think, well, yeah, I know because it's me, that Kyrath has a better perception. But what he would do is he would say things like, um, so like when we met the demon hunters, he wrote, or no, actually the better example would have been from the cave, because Kyrath saw the prince that looked like a slithering kind of thing, and so Sam kind of seemed fishy, and he was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But and what we ended up being is that we were tracking Naga. Because I'm a night elf and Naga are part of our history, he then said, once, because I then rolled a good perception, he's like, oh, no, you, on the other hand, Oriana, you know what these are. This, because this is linked to your history. Also, I also speak Naga, so I've done some research into that. So he was like, boom, you looking from these details, you know what it is. So he basically told us the same things, but obviously my character looking at those things are going to make different connections than his character, just because of different histories and different ideas.
Yeah. The other thing that I think the passive perception or rolling behind the scenes lets you do is it avoids the metagaming that often occurs when someone rolls like a 2 on their perception and they say, "Oh, you didn't see anything interesting." They'd be like, "There's going to be a trap and I'm going to get impaled, so I'm going to real cautious all of a sudden." But if you really just weren't paying attention, you didn't notice anything in, real life,
Mm-hmm.
then um, you know, then you wouldn't be acting on guard because you saw nothing that would make you on guard. Some players are good at just going past a bad perception roll and just being like, okay, I'm gonna play the same way I did before. But it's really hard because then you as a player think, even if you didn't actually miss anything important, you're thinking, oh no, what did I miss? That was a bad perception roll. Oh no. So when they do
And
like
some,
if you do like a general perception roll, and then you roll really terribly, and the GM is just like, no, you don't see anything interesting. You just be like, you probably missed something. But if you do it behind the
yes,
scenes, you don't know what you got. I think I'm leaning more towards doing a combination thing where you do passive perception, just looking at their stats base to see, like, without actively paying attention, what would they just notice? Because how observant are they normally? Unless there's like extenuating circumstances, like they're fighting somebody and then they run into a new room. You're not going to be paying attention to the room, and then to figure out, does anybody notice the details that are important to the plot or something that might be dangerous? Then make a roll to see if anybody notices those, so that
yeah,
everybody at least sees the initial details, so then they can actively pursue perception if they want to. But you can save time if, you know they walk into a room and your one character sees the giant trap that's going to kill everybody before the trap actually kills everybody. That's usually useful. And it just, everybody just rolling 1,000 perception rolls just really bogs things down, because like every
it
time you enter a
does.
room, you're just like, oh my goodness.
Well,
And this is actually, I'm gonna slightly derail this, but it was based on what you said about the Naga and your backstory being related to it. In the Star Wars system, there's like the knowledge lore, like there's the different knowledges you can have, um, and I think I would also want to treat those as active and passive as well. So
yeah,
often it's just
that
like,
makes sense.
oh, you see this thing over here, and then you just wait, and then the player inevitably asks you, well, based on my character backstory and I have knowledge this, would I know that? And then you're like, well, roll for it and we'll find out. If you have a if you have a but if you have a
Yeah,
but if you have a and then they roll like a 1 and you're like, you don't remember anything about any biology whatsoever. I'm sorry.
even though you're a doctor and you spent your entire life in the sciences, nope, you know nothing.
Yeah, so it avoids the failing when you should know it, because your
Mm-hmm.
memory probably would be jogged upon seeing the thing, unless it's something
Yes.
really obscure. You're like, I know I've seen it before, but I don't remember where I saw it. Like Gandalf looking for the One Ring and be like, is that the One Ring? Maybe I have to go find some records, but I think I know what this is. I'm not sure. It might just be a magic ring of some sort. Um, but
Well, and that's a great example, because then we could easily say that maybe he rolled a 10 on magic item knowledge. So, and to go to your point, just not to interrupt you, but just to jump off of that, the I think you should always avoid saying something like you know nothing or you've seen nothing. I think you should, if they roll a 2, even if they roll a 1, I think you should just leave them a door where it's like, this seems familiar. You know something about
yeah,
this. Or like,
if they would have been able to know something about it using the skill, it should at least be
right.
familiar. Be like, or it reminds you of something else, but you're not exactly
Hmm.
sure what
Or if
that
they fail
is.
a perception, don't be just like, oh, you're stupid and you saw nothing. Give them a reason. Like, okay, so while you were looking, you tripped on something and you fell flat on your face, and all thoughts of what you were looking for went out while your party laughs at you. Because then that gives them it doesn't, it's A, they didn't miss something. B, it doesn't treat them like they're just morons who stare and be like, everything is nothingness and I don't know anything. And and see it gives them, it gives it a little story moment, but they don't feel like, they they're just standing there like, oh, I don't even notice that the wall is purple. That's stupid.
Yeah. So yeah, with passive perception or active perception, and then there's a passive knowledge versus an active knowledge. Like if you're going looking for something, you may or may not be able, like you're like I should be able to find this with my expertise, but I don't know it off the top of my head, kind of thing.
Right.
And so I think like, oh, you see this thing, and before the player even asks, like, can I roll for this thing? Ideally, we would be prepared enough ahead of time to be like, oh, I know which characters would know about this thing
Hmm.
beforehand. So when I created the Hiss in my game, I knew that Kalani. I'm not sure her backstory doesn't really say how much she knows about Sith monsters and dark side creatures, but growing up as a Jedi would probably have at least heard the term and would know what it is.
Hmm.
And then so I think then if you want to roll, if you're not sure based on character backstory and the skill level, then I think a roll is appropriate to be like, well, I don't know how much my character would actually know about it. Then that's a player's choice. But if you give them at least like a, yeah, this is like a monster that's dark side, and then they're like, I'll roll more, and then Eagle rolled really well, and then I was like, yeah, they have like this poison that's really bad. Just don't go near them. Whereas maybe someone in the Jedi just had heard the name before and knew it was a dark side creature, but if you roll poorly on your knowledge, maybe you never saw that they had poison. You just know that there's some sort of dark creature, and you're not sure how to fight them. But
Right. Well, to put it in reality, I mean, it would be like an American kid who's grown up in America their whole life, has access to a zoo and doesn't know what an elephant is. Like that's, I mean, I'm sure there are Americans who don't know what an elephant is, but it's a really rare circumstance. And so it would be stupid to assume, oh, your backstory mentions nothing about elephants. You don't know anything about elephants, when it's like every American, most kids grow up next to a zoo, like within 30 miles of them.
mm,
So they know what an elephant is. You go to preschool, they'll like the E is usually an elephant. And you may not know like about ivory and how it works, or about how the elephant, biologically functions, but like some things. They're big, they're strong, they're capable of crushing things. They crush watermelons at a circus. Like some basic things, so you're not going to be shocked when you see an elephant for the first time.
yeah, and then that way, if you always let your players know a little bit of something of things they should know, when you say you've never seen this before, you know nothing.
Hmm.
They know that's not just because they rolled badly. You know that's because their character has actually legitimately never seen it before. And you're like, this is probably something important that the GM has been introducing. I should pay attention to this. But also,
Hmm.
my character is also intrigued because my character now knows, wow, I've never seen that before. That's weird. And then
Right.
maybe that is the driver for you to go investigate it. Like if you come across an elephant and you know things about elephants, you're like, I don't care. But if you grew up in like South America, like in the middle of nowhere, and you've never seen an elephant before, and then you go and you see an elephant, if you're like in the middle of Africa and that you would get all of a sudden get transported, and you're like, do I know if it's dangerous or not? I don't know. It looks pretty big. It looks pretty like,
Hmm.
let's keep an eye on those because I don't know. I just can tell that it's large, and maybe I see it eating plants, but I don't know if it's actually dangerous or not. And somebody else would know a lot more. But that's kind of my point about that.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and then that's the other thing too with that is, yeah, like your just general knowledge of things and how they work. But the other thing I think that a great way to kind of, because the other thing is you have to battle with details, is out of character knowledge versus player knowledge, or in character knowledge. Because, and I do this, I'm guilty of this, I do it a lot, and I have to hold myself in. But like, I know a lot about Star Wars, and I know a lot about fantasy. And so whenever there's weird shenanigans going on in any of our campaigns, it's easy for me to jump to the conclusion of, oh, I know, because like I know a lot about D&D monsters. And so when I hear things like, you see a trail of some kind of like gelatinous ooze, I'm like, oh, instantly that's an ooze. We shouldn't go into that room.
What are you talking
But
about?
I
Oozes
think,
are fine. We almost died. It was fine.
yeah, not fine. No. But I think one of the ways you can avoid is try to be more creative when you're describing, like, especially creatures and monsters. So like let's go back to the elephant example. Let's say, and again, gonna put we could just put this as a caveat to everything. Know your characters, know their backstories, know the things that they would know. So, but with that in mind, let's say you know for a fact no one has seen an elephant. How that's possible, I don't know. But let's just say that your whole party's never seen one. But the people playing the characters, they all know what an elephant is. They're gonna instantly understand that. But what you can do in order to avoid that is to say things. You see large circular prints in the ground, and you see it leading up to something. It leads up to a gray-skinned animal that stands, about 15 feet tall, and it has large, seemingly like horn-like appendages sticking up. Then, when you're describing this, then it challenges your players to use their brain to put the things together and be like, oh, she's describing an elephant. That's okay. I know that. But then too, if they miss that detail as the player, then you can easily say that they missed that detail as a character. And that makes it a lot easier. You don't have to like reason with them as to what it is. You say, well, you didn't know what it was, so clearly your character didn't know. And I think especially too with like fantasy creatures, like if you're in fantasy, we've all grown like I think everyone in our group has grown up probably with Lord of the Rings, so everyone knows what elves and dwarves and gnomes and all these things are. But if you're playing a character that doesn't know those things, I think it's important to try and describe the creatures in a different way or add your own different twist to them, so that you give your players that chance to. I mean, it's like the troglodytes. When you guys met them, I knew none of your players knew what troglodytes were. You guys knew what goblins were, but I was like, none of you. I think what I reasoned was if anyone had it, it would be Vinda and Eretheus, because they've lived in Quidditch their whole life. So maybe they've encountered them. But they're small, a lizard folk tribe. Hardly anyone runs into them. If they do, they're just seen as vermin. So it's like it's not something people consciously think about. So I didn't describe them. I didn't come out to the players and say, you see a group of troglodytes. Whereas if it was like a group of
I just take
orcs or
the meaning of the
goblins,
actual word troglodyte, and it's like, this is not what those are. Well,
no,
kind of, but not really, because they're not people. So no.
no. The fantasy troglodyte is a delineation. But like, again, goblins and orcs are like the elephants of fantasy. You'd be hard pressed to find any character who unless they're like lived in isolation their whole life and never encountered anything and never read a book. You can easily just say to your players, yeah, you see a tribe of goblins ahead of you coming your way. You know.
So all this to sum up, saying, tell players the things that their characters would know, and give your players enough stuff to work with. If everybody walks into a room and rolls like a 1 on perception, don't say none of you noticed anything, and all of a sudden the roof collapsed because it was shaking, and no one noticed because inexplicable reasons. Like, have you ever been in a shaking room and never noticed? So don't do that. I know it can be fun because you're like, they didn't notice my genius traps. Don't do it. Tell them things so that they know, but be okay with them if they made an assumption about something you said without you actually saying it, as long as you're sure it's not something you did that was your fault that's going to derail the campaign. Like, if you said something wrong and it gave the players the wrong impression, be like, guys, backtrack. I said this. I really meant to say this. You're interpreting what I said correctly, but what I said was wrong, so let's move on. But if they interpreted what you said and what you said was correct and they interpreted it incorrectly, let them run with it and see what fun happens.
Yeah, indeed. I think you can have some really cool moments of character, not just character development, but just player moments. To be like, I can't believe we missed that thing that 2 sessions ago. That was a great moment. We walked right into that trap, or we completely missed the fact that he was a villain the whole time, which is what happened to our campaign. We completely trusted that cat until he revealed himself, and even when he did reveal himself, it took us all a second to realize, like, wait, he's trying to kill. He's trying to kill Kalani. Oh, well,
Dal
that
never
changes
trusted
everything.
him. Dal was like, this seems way too convenient, and then he wanted to leave him behind, and then afterwards he's just like, you know what, everybody hates me enough, fine, I'll keep the cat guy. It's fine. But yeah, it can make for some fun reveals when everybody realizes, oh no, that thing we assumed was totally wrong, and it totally screwed up our plans, and then they have to figure out how to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I think don't be afraid of letting your players. Don't lead your players in the wrong way, but don't be afraid of letting their imaginations take them in the wrong direction. Let them go for a little while. Let them see. Always bring them back. Always bring them back to your story, we'll let them go for a little while and let them have their fun with that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. So of course we, as always, leave you with a question. So our question for you today is: how do you handle details in your campaign? Where do you draw the line for your players? What do you make sure that they know about, and what things do you just kind of let them go and figure it out in their own time? We of course would love for you to watch our 3 campaigns now. We have 3 campaigns, so there's no excuse. You have plenty of options. We have, as always, our Star Wars campaign, which we will be resuming this Friday. We have our Vacanis campaign, which we just did our last session of. So please go check that out because it was a very interesting point, as Kylar pointed out. And we just started our World of Warcraft campaign, and I would say ours is probably the most humorous of all the campaigns. That one you're going, unless you just don't like humor, you're going to laugh at that one. Also, because it is December, we can start hinting towards future plans because on the 22nd, right before Christmas, we will be having a Christmas special.
21st. It's the 21st.
21st.
Don't tell them Saturday. It's on Friday. It's still Friday.
It's on Friday. Still Friday. Same time, same place. It'll be run by the wonderful GM Kylar, who will be leading us on a prehistoric journey, which will be set in the Primeval TV show kind of thing, but without all of the terrible characters from Primeval. Just
all the characters are
selves.
great. It's a personal opinion of the other person doing the outro that they're terrible.
Yeah, it may be personal, but also probably joined by a lot of people. Anyway, it'll be great. It'll just be our and the best thing about the campaign is we will be playing our goofy selves. We're not even going to be playing characters. It'll just be us. So the whole thing about details and stuff, we don't even have to cross into metagaming because it'll just be whatever we all know at the time, which I hope is more than a little about dinosaurs. I might have to do a lot of dinosaur research.
Oh, you can't do research ahead of time. That's cheating. You can't do that. You're now forbidden. Everyone can no longer look up any new knowledge.
What if I just hear about it in conversation? Just like,
well, you'll have to talk to me a lot because then it'll probably from the conversation, except I know you're trying to do it, so it's not going to work.
We'll see. We'll see how that works. We'll see what I can do. We're going to pull out. Hopefully I don't die in the first couple of hours. That would be unfortunate. But anyway, yes. So please go watch those and get ready for that campaign. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and it'll be a great way to kind of kick us off into the Christmas season and end the year. Also, big announcement is after, so if you've watched our Tuesday segment, you've seen that we're using something a little bit different. Well, after the Christmas special, Kylar and I will also be bringing the tabletop similar to our games, and we will finally have 3D maps, and it will be hopefully way more entertaining, way more interesting to watch and see the things going on as they do. So I think that is all the things we have to talk about for tonight. So we'll hopefully see you guys next week for our next episode, and hopefully you will watch us on Friday. We will be diving right back into Star Wars, and hopefully solving some of the mysteries that have been going on for quite a while. But probably not, knowing us. It'll still be a great night, though. So, as always, thank you for watching us, and God bless, and have a great night.